my name is Taylor Poole. Thank you all for taking the time out of your schedule to come and view my senior projects. So I'm assuming you all have opened up a book at least once in your life, but have you ever tried reading a book in another language? ¿Han deseado aprender otras lenguas? Have you ever wanted to learn another language? Well, my product can help you do just that. Hi, my name is Taylor Poole, and I was born in San Antonio, Texas. I moved to Georgia when I was about 7 years old, and even though I was young, it was a bit of an adjustment for me because San Antonio was a very diverse city, while Woodstock and Canton are a bit more homogeneous. In San Antonio, I remember doing things like cascarones, which are confetti-filled eggs that you take and break over someone else's head on Easter. I also remember going to festivals like Fiesta San Antonio and listening to a lot of Tejano music. In middle school, I was extremely introverted and I felt very alone, so I began creative writing my 8th grade year as a way to cope. That same year, I also took my first Spanish class and I was really excited about it because it reminded me of home. 4 years later, I'm bilingual and I still use writing as a way to express myself, so I thought it would be a good idea to explore the career of being a bilingual novelist. My research topic was foreign language requirements in schools, and what I found was that many foreign language programs are entirely inadequate. Learning languages later in life via grammar lessons and memorization is unnatural and makes it much more difficult to acquire the fluency level of a native speaker. This subject is very important to me because as a writer, my market depends on what languages are demanded by the educational system. My product is a bilingual short story which I wrote and illustrated. It is published on Amazon.com, as you can see. It serves as an allegory for political trends in Latin America in the last century, and it also has a lot of symbolism for the Guatemalan genocide, which many people don't know about. What you are looking at now is my introductory section. The first step in publication is actually having a book to publish in the first place. Although I have done creative writing in the past, I have never attempted anything of this magnitude. And so I got frustrated when I first started. Oops, that's the wrong one. Because there were some days that I couldn't work because my inspiration just wasn't there. I also ran into another issue at this stage, in that as I was going back to review the work I had done, I realized that the subject matter that I touched on was much too difficult for children, which was my original intended audience. I discussed this issue with my project facilitator, Mrs. Beth Herms, who is an author, and she suggested that I change my audience level to high school and beyond. The reasoning behind this was that I could create a higher quality work if I was inspired, rather than a low quality work when I was uninspired. After finishing the writing process, I had to go through and edit everything, and this is the stage where the language issues came into play. Although I am comfortable speaking Spanish at a conversational level and I have no issues understanding Spanish newscasts or television shows, I had trouble understanding fully the connotations of my words, as evidenced by the large amount of pen on this paper. To combat this issue, I consulted with a lot of the Spanish teachers here at Woodstock, and they offered me suggestions. I also made heavy use of Spanish-English dictionaries. To make the cover art of my book, I used the Shapes tool on Microsoft Office PowerPoint. All the images you see here are essentially a collection of shapes that I made using the Shapes tool. For instance, this bush is a collection of pentagons, which I copied and pasted many times. I changed their direction, and I resized them until they resembled a bush shape. Once I had a bush, I could then copy and paste each bush to make multiple rows of bushes, and as I moved back along each row, I shrunk the bushes to give the illusion of depth. All the shapes you see here are ones that were pre-built into the Microsoft system, with the exception of the footprints and the bird. Once this whole whole thing was done, I could save it as an image and upload it to any website for publication. I also did all of the illustrations for my book. The first step in the illustration process was creating an outline using an ebony pencil. Ebony pencil differs from normal pencil in that its lead is softer, so it's easier to smudge and it has a less permanent presence on the paper. I filled in the ebony sketch using chalk pastels of differing colors, and even though you can't really see it on the smartboard, I used red and green pigments, and I created different shades by smudging in different areas. I filled in the wings using a zigzag pattern with black charcoal, and I did white charcoal over the black charcoal. I created the backgrounds by taking another stick of charcoal and rubbing it on its side, like so, around the edges of the picture. I left a white outline around the bird to give it a halo effect, and using my fingers, I was able to rub in the charcoal that was on the paper to create a wash effect. I then sprayed each artwork with a fixative, and after the fixative had dried, I was able to scan it and save it as an image and then upload it to any website for publication. The final step in this whole process is, of course, doing the actual publishing. I found a website that was recommended to me by my project facilitator called gradespace.com, and during this step I was extremely glad to have a project facilitator because Ms. Hearns knew everything there was to know about this website. She walked me through how to give my book a matte versus glossy cover finish. She showed me how to input all the information I needed for my cover, including my cover art, the description of the book, the author's notes, the barcode, and she even helped me to get an ISBN number. An ISBN number is a code that is unique to my book, and it helps identify it out of all the books in America. It essentially protects my book from plagiarism. After I uploaded the document with the artwork, I was able to put in a request to the company that runs CreateSpace.com, and 2 weeks later I had printed copies in my hand. I gave those copies to the Spanish teachers here at Woodstock. The company also automatically set up the Amazon.com website for me. All in all, there are many takeaways I have from this project. The first of them being patient. Being patient. As I mentioned earlier, I became frustrated in the writing process, and I had to learn to let things go. If my creativity wasn't flowing that day, then I had to learn to take a step back and not try and force things, because when you try to force things, you end up creating a lower quality work than what you could have had. Another thing I walk away from this project with is improved Spanish fluency. There's a huge difference between words that you use on a daily conversational basis in Spanish and words that you use to convey abstract, hypothetical ideas. I like to think of it as the equivalent of SAT vocab words. That's what I used in this project. Finally, I have a changed career outlook. I walked into this project wanting to be a novelist, and I realized that I'm not a good fit for that career, because to be a novelist, you have to be able to sell books. And to sell books, you sometimes have to change the words you have written. And I prefer to have complete autonomy over the words I have written, so this idea kind of makes me uncomfortable. I did, however, enjoy the political and cultural aspects of my project, so I now intend to major in international affairs. Once again, thank you all for your time. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask.